So this is another session of the Interface X live coding. A couple of weeks ago, we worked on a My History feature that allows the shopper to access the whole list of previous searches. And today we are going to work on a related history to that. So we have to say that privacy is at the empathy core, and we have decided to create a component that enable or disable the history queries, which are stored in the device's local storage. To follow the GDPR, the shopper has to give consent to store information in the device. And this applies not only to cookies, it applies also to the local storage. The history queries would be qualified as a preference or functional cookies if they were cookies, because they are in the local storage, and they need explicit consent. So even though history queries are a very useful feature to remember the last searches you have made on a website, if we want to be one step closer to a consentless search experience, we need to offer the option to disable the history queries and not store them in the device. So that's what we are going to do today. And Guillermo Iglesias is going to work on this and show you a little bit more of the interface X components. So, Guille, when you want.
Okay. So as Gerardo said, let's talk about this task that we're going to do. And first off, let's take a look at the Jira issue. The issue is telling us that we have to create a method. So it's going to be mostly a function that it's allowing us to enable or disable the history queries. And it says that as a part of this privacy controls feature, we will need to provide a way to enable or disable this feature. And by default, it's going to be enabled because all our current empathy customers have this feature enabled. And what we need to do, these two key points, is that when the end user is going to remove, when the end user is going to disable this, the history queries will get removed from the local storage, and we have to update the state. So we have to say that, of course, this has been disabled. And the same with enabling. So when the user enables it, we have to, again, update the state. And we will probably have to also update the local storage because we need this to be persistent. We need this to be remembered once the user refreshes the page again. So to understand a little bit better what is this about, I think the task is quite clear. But for those who really don't know, let's take a look at what history queries are. And history queries are just these ones. To summarize, it's just a history of the queries that the user have performed before. So even if I click on a suggestion or I put something in the search box, these history queries get consumed from the interaction of the user. To illustrate a bit what are we going to do, I created this little view. And as you can see, we have the history queries loaded here with a search box to explain a bit better what are we going to do. And you can see the previous history queries we had in the other view are here because they are in the state of the application and also in the local storage. So I can access them anywhere in this app. So let's move to the code. Let's do a little bit of walkthrough on this repository, on our X repository. At first glance, what you will see is we've got a lot of packages. And for what we need to know, that is, for what we need to change, that is this behavior and this component, we will need to go to the X components package, which is the one we need to work on. And for source, and we will see a lot of folders. First thing we would probably do is to move to components, but we won't find history queries here because these are just like dumb components that mostly don't need any state, like for layouts, for modals, for panels. So where are the history queries? In the X models, because history queries is a feature And all those features are split in modules. And what is a module? You may ask. Well, a module is as I said, it's a piece of code. It's split, and each module has a store. Like a normal Vuex store, like you would probably be working with this, or in React is like Redux. It's in a store with a state, with actions, with getters, with mutations. But the magic of it is that each one has its own store, and each one is independent from each other. And how we do this? Well, we do this through what we call the wiring. The wiring is like this big object at the end that is taking events as keys, and each of the keys has an action or a mutation associated that will be fired, will be executed once the event is emitted. So this is kind of an event-driven system that allows us to have no dependencies between modules, and that's the magic of it. So you can have history queries by its own. You don't need any other feature. It will be work. There will be no errors. There will be no dependencies. It will work like it is. But the thing is, we need to understand this to do this task, because the wiring is going to be the source of all the change in behavior or in the model we want to work on. So we wanted to change the history queries behavior. We have to go to the history queries module. And the first thing we need to do probably is to create something that is telling us that these history queries are enabled or not. And that's going to be in the state. So we have a state, which is, we have the module, which also provide, it's also another object within a state as a function, and has other objects like getters, mutations, and actions. And well, we have to go here in the state, and we have to add a new property. And the task set us that we need this to set as default as true. So it's going to be enabled by default. And the task is requiring this to be changed. So we will probably need a mutation for this. So let's do it. Enabled equals is enabled, and a comma. And oh yeah, I need the state. And you will see here that it's complaining everywhere, because I need to change the type. The type is restricting me to do this for now, so I need to modify the type. The type, as you can see, it has it's a generic that has other types for each state, getters, mutations, and actions. So let's move to the state first. Have to add this new property. And on the mutations, we have to also add this new function we created with this new mutation. Which is returning void. Okay. Now it's not complaining anymore. So great. We'll have a property and a way to mutate this property in the state. How are we going to do this? How are we going to change this this property? Well, we need to execute this mutation, and this is going to be done in the wiring, as we said before. So the wiring is going to be all the source of changes that we're going to be having in the state. Okay. So, well, first of all, I'm going to create an event. I'm going to type it. Something like user doglet history queries, because this is coming from the interaction of the user. So it's telling us that the user did toggle these history queries, and it's having a value that we call payload. As you can see, all of these events we have they have payload or not. They can return void. But in this case, we need to know what is the value coming from a component or whatever it is. And we need this to be pass it here, so we know what value to put in the mutation and to mutate the state. So in this case, it's a Boolean because it's the same as the isEnabled property we will change. So now we've got this, this event. So we go to the wiring. And we will use this event. And we will need this to be executing our mutation. And for that, I need to commit it. So I will need something like this. To be faster, I'm going to copy this, okay? And we will adapt. We don't need payload because the payload is already provided by the event. And we need the set isEnabled mutation for that, okay? So I want to take this. I'm going to pass it here. Now I'm going to do one more thing for the sake of the example. I had this little view here with a button I created. And this button, the only thing that is doing is emitting this event I just recently created. So we can take a look, but it's just a button. This event button is taking events from these props. And anytime I click this button, it will execute all these events with this value. And this value is coming from the state. There's lots of things under the hood here, but I think it's pretty easy. So, oh yeah, and you will have a button here with an on and off. And here it is. I'm gonna start it again. Okay. So now I have the history queries. The history queries has the same behavior as before. If I look for something else, like mobile, they are here. So they are stored in the local storage. They are stored in the state. Now, if I disable them, will this work? No, it won't. Why? Because I didn't say it anywhere in the code that I need to restrict these history queries once the state of application is telling us that it's disabled. So I need to look for that, and I need to change that. So let's go back to the code. And let's take a look, for example, at the wiring. And even if I don't understand really what's going on here in the wiring, I can read it. And I can say, okay, if the user accepts the query, usually I get with new, I'm provided with new history queries. So maybe one of these two actions or mutations are going to do what I'm looking for. In this case, it's going to be this add query to history queries, which is doing a lot of stuff under the hood also. Let's take a quick look. Store actions. It's this one. There's a lot of stuff going on here, but at the end, what I see is that it's returning, or it's dispatching an action that it's called set history queries. That looks like what we are looking for. So let's move to the action. And we will see that this is what we're looking for. So finally, we've got this commit. This is the thing that is changing the state. This is the thing that is changing the set history queries. It's providing new history queries. And it's also storing these new history queries to the local storage. So the thing is, I probably won't need to do anything of this if these history queries are disabled. So I think I can resolve this with just an if. I can access the state here. And I can say that if this is enabled, just do all of this. But if not, nothing happens. So I think this will resolve our first problem. Let's move again. I'm going to refresh. We have the history queries on. So if I look for something else, like, I don't know. Okay, I ran out of imagination, so Muñeco again. I have Muñeco again. I have all my queries again. If I disable this and I look for something else, it's not getting stored, okay? It's not in the state. it's not in the local storage. So now we are providing the user, the end user, we are providing the end user with this new function. We are empowering this user to control if they want to have these history queries or not. But the thing is, it doesn't make sense that we allow the user to disable this, but not like get them out of here. So I don't want to display these history queries anymore. If I don't want the history queries to be on, I don't need these history queries to be displayed here. So one thing we need to do more is to clean these history queries, maybe in the state and also in the local storage, once the user has disabled these history queries. I'm stressing a lot this about the local storage because, as Gerardo said, this is this development we are doing is focused on privacy. So in this case, if for whatever reason the user wants or is concerned by any kind of privacy at some point, if the user doesn't really want this interaction to be stored in the local storage, now the user is able to restrict this. So I think this is a pretty good addition. So let's do this. Let's clean all these history queries, and also we will make another thing that it's that once we disable it, we will be able to remember this configuration. So if the user has disabled the history queries, once the user refreshes the page, it will remind there. So it will remind the user if the user did enable or disable these history queries. So let's do this. So for now, we have a mutation. It's this mutation, but we need to do more things once this mutation is executed. So we will probably need to add more stuff, and we will probably need an action for that. So let's create an action, okay? Let's go first to the types. In this case, I'm going to type this first. It's going to be easier for us. I got a new action, something like toggle history queries. Same, it's going to get this value if it's enabled or not. It's a Boolean. It's not going to return anything. Excuse me. So now I need to, let's create the implementation now. An action is going to be an exported function. But we don't really need this key name. It's just toggle history queries. We're going to say that this is the type, what the type we had added before. So it's just form part of the actions of the module, and it's this action. And of course, it's a function, okay? So these actions have some parameters we can use. So it has a context. The context has the state, dispatch, the commit, and all the tools we need for changing the, well, for executing other mutations or other actions or consulting the state. In this case, we will need to clean these history queries. So we will need to execute an action. So I think we will need to dispatch. We will need to commit because we need to call our mutation to change this is enabled property. And of course, we can access the payload of the event. And I'm going to format this because it's a mess. Okay. And now let's do this execution. So we said that if the user disables history queries, so if the history queries are false. Yes, we need to access the state also, I think. State. Okay. If the is enabled property is false, then I need to clean my history query. So I'm just going to dispatch. I'm going to call this set history queries action. I'm going to pass an empty array as a value. So now I will get rid of all the history queries in the state and in the local storage. Remember that this action was doing both things. So that's good. We will do both things in just one line of code. And now I need to, of course, call our mutation, because we won't be calling this mutation once we replace it by this action. So we call this mutation with the value coming from the event. Okay. Okay, for now, that's great. We need to import this in our module. I think the import is not going to work here. I don't know why. So I have to do this manually. I'm going to copy this one. This is toggle history queries action. Toggle history queries. And here. Okay. I don't know why is this complaining. Okay, yeah, because I have not imported this correctly. Okay, yeah, I see this. Okay, that was the error. Now it should look good. Okay, cool. Now we've got a new action in the module. We'll have this action that is doing what we really wanted to do. Now we need to say to the wiring that when we execute, well, when this event is emitted, now we don't want this to be the mutation, but we need to be called to the action to be called. So let's replace it. We don't need this anymore. So this is going to be a wire dispatch. We're going to dispatch our new action, which is this toggle history queries action. Well, let's change the name. And let's change the names on here also. Okay. And let's go back to the page. Let's see if this is working or not. I'm refreshing, and now we've got this on. Remember, it's true by default. So now if I turn this off, okay, it's not working. So now let's take a look over what's going on. Okay. I'm not sure. So we've got the wiring. Using toggle history queries. This should be working fine.
Are you probably using the is enabled from the state instead of the payload?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, you are right.
Could it be that?
Yes. I'm pretty sure it's that. Okay, no, not in this action. It's on the one we created. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it. So, of course, this is taking the previous. Okay, let me explain a bit. As we are commenting before, after we are creating this, we need this to be done once the user is disabling this, but in the state, it's still on true. So that's why this is not happening. Of course, yeah, you're right. So you should probably be doing just this. And of course, we don't need this to be getting from the state. It's going to be getting from the payload of the event. Yeah. Let's see if this works now. This is live coding. I mean, things happen. Okay, that's perfect. Now it's working. So now we are not only providing the user with this action, now history queries are not working anymore, but also for usability and for privacy, we are also saying, okay, if you want to disable these history queries, you won't have them displayed also. So that's great. There's one more thing to do, that it's this one. So if I refresh the page, the application is not remembering if I did enable or disable these history queries. So we can also do this, and we're going to do this. So I'm going to move back to the code. And now, as we have this, this action, we can add new stuff here in this action. And we can access to some services we have that manage this local storage, like this local storage service, okay? We import this from the utils, and we can set whatever we want, and we can have this key and the value we want to be storing. So in this case, we want to store this is enabled value, and we need a key. So let's do it a little bit more correct. Let's move it to a file that has a constant on it. So we can export a new constant, and it's going to be history, I don't know, queries enabled. Okay. Now I can use this in my action. Now instead of a string, okay. And now I will have to do one more thing. It's that I will need to recover this value from the local storage once the application is loaded. Luckily for us, as we are here in the module and we have the state that it's a function that it will get executed each time the the application is initialized, we can recover this property here. So we can access to the local storage here. We can get the item. It's going to be a Boolean. It's going to have the same key we created before, and we need a fallback for this. As we said, this is true by default. The fallback is going to be true. Okay. Back again to our application. Okay, now let's work on it. We've got history queries enabled. We look for queries. We look for better written queries. We look for other things, Star Wars. Got 3 queries. Now we disable them. They get out of the local storage. They get out of the state. They are not displayed. That's perfect. We've got the history queries off. And now if we refresh the application, they remain off. So, well, I think we have it. We are removing the history queries. We are updating the state, and we are synchronizing this with the local storage. I think that would be all. There are some other next steps. So, for example, to create a nice PR for this, once we have done this, this development, we should create some tests. We should review and document all the things we've done. So we should document all the events. We should document the actions and mutations, and that's it. I think that would be all. So I don't know if that was clear. If you are missing something, if you've got questions.
I think it was great, Guille. As you know, we started 2 weeks ago with the My History feature. Now a feature to enable or disable the history queries, so we can go for a consentless experience in the future. And this is everything part of having a full history feature where the shopper will be able to access all the history queries stored and ordered by date. So I think we will keep working on that on the next session, maybe in 2-3 weeks. And we hope to see you there. Thank you very much for coming. And bye-bye. Have a good day.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, guys. Have a great one.